I've talked about the Elgato Low Profile mic arm a few times before, but this is actually an entirely new model now. This is officially a new version, a higher end version. This is the Elgato Low Profile Wave Mic Arm Pro. And there are definitely some pros to this Pro model, specifically that right there, because what's new is this pneumatic arm right here. So this part of the arm is now pneumatic. If you've ever used the Elgato Low Profile before, you kind of know that adjusting it this way can sometimes be a little bit tricky because sometimes it doesn't stick or you have that dreaded mic arm sag. Now there's no sags in the arm because you can just adjust everything pneumatically right there and it stays right where you put it. So let's talk all about the new Elgato arms, but I do want to let you know that Elgato did send out the Low Profile Pro. They sent out this arm to me at no cost. I don't have to make a video. I'm not obligated to say or do anything. And in fact, I talk a lot about Elgato products on my channel because I like them a lot. This is the first time they've sent anything. So this is the first time you're seeing me talk about an Elgato product that I did not pay for myself, but I absolutely would. And I bought like 4 other low profile arms plus the wave arm, probably more than any single person needs to. And that actually means we can start with a little bit of a history lesson with the original Elgato low profile arm. The benefit of a low profile arm versus a tall one is, believe it or not, it's low. So that way that can stay out of the way. And that way it's not something that's kind of hanging out here. Sometimes this is just a thing that fits better in somebody's setup. And a cool thing about the Elgato is it had this nice internal cable routing with these magnetic covers. Few downsides to this original design though. These magnetic covers, this was my big complaint in my first review, these come off so easily. So on the original arm, you route your cable through the top like this, and there are these magnetic covers, but the problem is that these covers just aren't strong enough. And so it doesn't take very much pressure at all for them to pop off. And so if you have your mic mounted here, and you find yourself moving your arm, these kind of just constantly pop on and off. So that was always a problem. And then the other issue was this top part here, this top arm, sometimes being a little weak. And if you have a heavier mic, you'll sort of find it sagging and sagging. And there's an Allen key adjustment here. You can kind of crank that down. I usually have mine cranked down really, really tight. So that way nothing could move there. So this is actually the first time that they've come out with an official new model, but they did do some revisions to the original low profile. I actually did a follow-up video because a couple years after I had this one, people said some of those problems were fixed. So I bought a new one just to see what was different. And there were a lot of differences, namely the top magnetic parts were way stronger. They don't come out accidentally anymore. You really actually have to like pull and use force to get the magnetic parts out, which is very cool. It also added another cable routing port on the bottom here. So you can either route your cable out to the top or the bottom. If you're using a microphone that has the mount in the back, then sometimes running the cable up this way makes sense. But if you're using a microphone like this, that kind of mounts on the bottom, having it run out the bottom makes sense. And before you just didn't have that option. So that was a cool addition. And then one thing they also added was instead of this just Allen key thing, there was just a handle here so you could crank this and tighten it down manually. It was still a little bit difficult to get it to fully stay. I really like put everything I have into it to kind of keep it steady, and then it's pretty good and it works well, but there's still like a little bit of sag sometimes there. So it was definitely a big improvement. That was not a new addition. So it wasn't like you had to go look for the version 2 or anything. It was just after a certain point, I think a couple years ago, that was kind of the only version of the original low profile arm you can buy. And that is still true now. Every time they kind of iterate and update and just sort of evolve the design based on user feedback, that is just the newest version. So it's not like a separate model. This is actually a separate model, separate price point, separate features, separate name. So right here on the box, it says Wave Arm Pro because the Pro is a different model than the original one. So now there is a little bit more to pay attention to and distinguish between the two. And so talking about some of the features of the Pro, it does have the exact same mount that comes on all Elgato arms for the most part. And I really like this. Not every mic arm company gets their mic arm mounts done well. And what's great about Elgato's is not only is it like big and chunky, so it really kind of mounts into the surface that you're attaching it to, but both of the parts that would touch your desk or your table or whatever surface you're mounting to are coated in soft rubber, so that way it's not going to leave any damage. And something I really like too is that this handle is a ratcheting handle. So if your desk is like, say, up against a wall or something and you don't have the room to fully spin it like this, what that means you can do is you can kind of turn it, lift it, turn it. You can just kind of keep ratcheting it to make sure that you get the adjustment that you want. So you can kind of see here, the widest this opens up to is about 2.5 inches, which is, that is pretty thick. There aren't a lot of tables and desks thicker than this. So this should work on most things. Now, something nifty about the Pro arm is that it does come with this little riser. So what that means is as you're putting the arm together, even though it is a low profile arm, if this height is just a little too low, you can pop this in here and now you have a little bit of extra height. So there's some versatility in there. I really like that. This kind of makes it sort of a nice height. In theory, you could also then pop it here if you needed this to like go under your monitor and then the second part to be a little bit higher. So you have some cool creative options in terms of putting the arm together. In fact, actually, something you can do if you really need to is you can just take the pneumatic part and put that right in the clamp, and then you could just have a small arm there. You could do the same thing with the originals as well, but if you just need like a very tiny stubby boom arm or you're working in a very compact space, this could actually be quite helpful. But the standard way of using the arm is just to put this bottom part here and this top part here, and you see this little part that fell off here. There are these joints here now, and these have magnetic covers on them, so that way it's easy to take these off and access the Allen keys, and then they're covered when you don't need them, which is kind of nice. Elgato did say they're going to be putting like custom ones of these and different colors and things available, so if you want, these almost just look like bottle caps. So I have a feeling there's probably some pretty fun room for creativity in terms of things people can do with like these points of the arm to sort of add a little bit of custom flair to it, which is always fun. Now, big thing you might be noticing now is that the cable routing is all on the bottom. So there's a couple things to that. The main reason for that is because this arm is now pneumatic. So in order to make room for all those components, you basically have to run the cable now in the bottom. But because of that, even though they did improve the magnets on the original arm and they're really nice now and the covers aren't an issue, because this is on the bottom, and so gravity is pulling down on it, and then if you have your cable in here, the cable is pulling down on it, these are really strong. Like sometimes almost difficult to take off, which is good. That's how I'd want it to be. But you do lose the top routing hole here for your cable because there are parts in this arm now. It's not just hollow. So you can only run the cable out the bottom. The easiest way to do it is just to kind of take your cable, clip it into place, do the same down here. And that's kind of how you can do that. See, this right here on the original Elgato arm, this would have pulled the magnetic thing off just by hanging there. And now like, they don't come out. They're very sturdy. Now the pneumatic arm does have a tension adjustment here. It does come with an Allen key to adjust that if you don't already have one. So right out of the box, I found mine to be good. I put this Lewitt LCT 240 on it. I've been using my Rode NT1 with it, the Shure SM7B. It's held all of those microphones just fine. But if you're using a microphone that's a little bit lighter or a little bit heavier than average and you need to adjust this, you can then adjust the tension right there, and then it's going to stay, perfectly balanced. And that's really the nice thing and the benefit to a pneumatic mic arm. And then another area of change is actually the mounting point here. So I've been calling for years for companies to just put teeth, like locking teeth in here to make sure things lock down and it's easy to mount in every direction, vertically and horizontally. They didn't do that, but they did make some changes. So let me see if I can take this off. You still have on the end here, you still have the proprietary Elgato nubbin. I don't know what the official term is, but that's what I call it. The downside to this is it doesn't really work with anything other than Elgato parts. So if you need to replace something, you got to go with the official, you Elgato go with the official parts. Now I was interested on the new arm to see that they did change the actual mount itself. They've been using the same one forever on all their arms. And so this right here is the original one, and this is the new one. They look pretty much the same. They're interchangeable. They work on the same mounts and the same things. But the difference is that the original one feels very metallic. It's like heavy, hard metal. This one, I believe, is made out of metal, but it feels soft. So I don't know if it's a really high density plastic. I think it's metal, but it doesn't feel nearly as hard as this. And so at first I was kind of like, oh, that almost feels cheaper. It's weird that there's a cheaper feeling thing on the more expensive Pro arm, but I think the benefit to that is because it's a little bit softer, it's actually significantly easier to lock this down and not have it go anywhere. Whereas sometimes this one, you could really crank it down and then it would still sort of like move if you put a heavy mic on there. So I've had much more luck with this one not coming out of place once I position it. Microphones like this specifically, that once they're in their shock mounts, they have to be spoken to in a certain direction, can be really tough to position on some boom arms, especially if you're in a situation like this where the boom arm is mounted to the side of you. Usually if the arm is coming from the front, it's not a problem, but if that's not an option for you, like I don't really want it in the way of my camera over there, and this specific desk is flush on the side, so I can't clamp anything here. So if I want to mount a boom arm here, it has to be this side of me. A lot of arms mean that then my mic is like this, facing the wrong direction. And what I can do here, because of this flexibility, is I can position it exactly how I want it to be and then lock it down, and it doesn't go anywhere, and it goes up and down. Now, the one thing, and you might have noticed this, the one thing, especially if it's gonna have the Pro moniker, is sort of this right here. Notice the angle of my microphone. It's pointed right at me, but if I lift it up, now it's pointed at the ceiling. So if you don't know why I'm bringing that up, on a lot of other arms, especially this is Elgato's own wave arm, the regular high profile arm, you position your microphone, see the angle I have this microphone? If I lift the arm up or down, the microphone doesn't change. That's incredibly helpful if you're making adjustments while recording or while filming, because then you don't have to change anything else. This is not a difficult thing to adjust, especially if I'm, taking breaks or I'm not doing something live. But if I'm in the middle of an actual live thing and now I adjust this and I have to kind of go over and maybe tweak this a little bit here, it's a little more fiddly than if I could just move this up or down and have the microphone stay at the exact same angle that I put it. And that's a pretty common feature on a lot of arms. I'm not entirely sure why it's not on this arm. It's really my only complaint, my only suggestion for improvement pretty much on this arm is just that right there, the fact that the mic does not stay at the same angle. That's also a very helpful thing if you're using your arm for something that is not a microphone. And especially with the Elgato arms, they come with a 1/4-20 mount by default, and that's because Elgato knows you could use that with other things. You can use them for lights, you can use them for cameras, you can even use them for the Elgato prompter, especially this being heavier. And so I guess just for reference, the arm is strong enough to support small cameras. So this is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II with the Sigma 16mm lens, and it's holding it up just fine. The prompter weighs less than this camera, so the prompter is fine on there, but prompter and camera is too much for the arm. So that's kind of the weight limit there. Hi, it's me from the future. You might notice that I have the camera and the prompter on the arm right now. I discovered something after recording the whole video, and that is this is way stronger than I thought it was, which is a very cool discovery. So right now I have an iFootage tripod head with the Sony a7 IV, the Sony 16-35, which is a very heavy lens, and the Elgato prompter. And if you notice, it's actually resisting sagging because it's significantly stronger than I thought. I was a little bit bummed that it could either do the prompter or a camera, but not both. And something didn't quite seem right to me. So what I ended up doing actually was just taking an Allen key with a little more leverage. I put it in here and I just cranked the bejesus out of that thing until something kind of went, and then I was able to turn it a little bit more. And that then suddenly started increasing the tension like crazy. So I don't know if that's just because this arm was new or what. I really put more pressure than I've ever put on a boom arm before trying to get this in here. So it's like, it felt kind of uncomfortable. Not 100% sure if it's something I should recommend that you do. But once I did that and this opened up, the amount of tension in this arm like increased like crazy. And now it's more than strong enough to support this, which is very exciting. The one caveat there, the one warning is this little mount right here. It's a lot of weight on this little mount here. And so I've had to crank this down, but because you got that proprietary nubbin, that's something that could potentially happen. That was perfectly timed. It's like we rehearsed it. We didn't, but there we go. So it's not gonna fall off or anything, but it's a lot of weight on this little thing. So use at your own discretion, I guess, to be sure if that's something you actually want to do or not. But this is pretty cool and definitely something that none of the other low profile arms, could even come close to supporting. But this is a good example though of why that constant angle is very important, because if you have your camera position, you just want to raise it, well, now your camera's pointing in a totally different direction. So for example, on the original wave arm, if you're using it for something like a camera and you want to raise or lower the camera's angle isn't changing. It's just being raised up or down. So it's almost like it's on a crane, like a fancy Hollywood camera situation. It's actually pretty cool. And that's really the only thing that I feel is missing from the Wave Pro arm is that type of functionality at the end, is being able to have it do this and not change the microphone like that when you just change the height of the arm. But otherwise, I think the new arm is definitely something worth arming yourself with, or at least considering it. If you already have one of the other Elgato arms, not 100% sure it's worth the upgrade, especially if it's not the super original one where everything kind of, the magnets fell off easily and it was tough to tighten. But if it's one of the more recent versions that have the strong magnetic covers and the knob here to latch it down, you probably don't necessarily need to upgrade to this unless you want to change the height of the microphone a lot, and that's really something that's causing you a lot of frustration. This will solve that problem for you. And if you don't have a low profile arm already, but you're looking to get one, I would definitely recommend this over the standard one, because this is a huge quality of life improvement, and it's something that, you know, it just makes everything a lot nicer and a lot easier. And speaking of things that make things nicer and easier, thank you to everyone who helps support my channel through Patreon and YouTube channel memberships. And if you want to check out my reviews on the tall Elgato Wave arm and the revised updated version of the low profile arm, not the Pro, but the original one, check out these videos right here.